When I started here in March, April 2014, myself, and I believe I can speak on behalf of many of my colleagues, didn't expect that what started in the eastern part of the country would last so long. To accept that this conflict still continues and still brings suffering to the people of Ukraine, all over Ukraine, but in particular of those Ukrainians that live near the contact line, is hard to accept, even more so that I'm leaving now and the conflict continues.
This is the most difficult. But if we are talking about like people, just local people, you always write and always say about these people, just locals who are like kids and poor people. In all this situation, I mean 4 years and a half, what did you see and what was the most like impression for you?
As I just mentioned, the suffering of the civilian population on both sides of the contact line, and in general the suffering of Ukrainians across the country from this unnecessary conflict has been a very, very deep experience for me, and one that I won't forget, of course. I also, of course, have met people directly and personally who have been affected by the conflict, who have been suffering, and what was equally amazing is that, with a few exceptions, all of these Ukrainians that I have met, especially near the contact line, they have not developed hate. They all believe in the possibility to have this conflict ending quickly, and made very clear to me and my colleagues that it is not their conflict that they are suffering from, and they don't understand why it is continuing. So the impression I have of Ukrainians on both sides of the contact line is a very positive one, is one of people that don't give up, and one of the people that believe in the good, and the people that know that this conflict will end, because most and foremost, it isn't theirs.
Mr. Hook, you always said that this conflict can be end like for 1 hour, I mean ceasefire or something like this. Why it's not happened till now?
Well, first of all, everybody understands weapons don't fire by themselves. Someone needs to pull the trigger, and for that person to pull a trigger, orders are either being issued, or the person acts without an order, and then his actions are tolerated. And for an order to be issued, a decision needs to be taken that normally is a political decision. So if you put that chain back to the beginning, that is then very clear that political decisions are required to issue these orders, which we have demonstrated have been issued in the past, and when they have been issued, they have been largely been adhered to. It's not an impossibility to end this, but this has to happen by all who have a responsibility to end this conflict, and these are the ones who have signed the Minsk agreement, that is Moscow, Kyiv, and certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. If these stakeholders do not issue these orders, not take these political decisions, it will continue. But once they are taken, and not unilaterally, but in mutual agreement, then it will end. And we have demonstrated before, at least 14 times when the sides have recommitted to the ceasefire, it can end the military technical part very, very quickly.
For all this period, I mean 4 years and how much time it was the silence?
We have not witnessed a single day without ceasefire violations. We have had days where small arms fire only was used by the sides, which is much less of concern for civilians. But our own records show clearly that there hasn't been a day without a ceasefire violation, without the use of weapons, which is the language used in the Minsk agreement.
1 day, you mean?
Not one day that the weapons have been silent.
One more question about not only ceasefire, but about the mission, about the possibility to go everywhere to your mandate. I mean, about this part of non-controlled border, Ukrainian-Russian border. You was there at some days or no? And if it's in other places where mission never was?
Myself and my colleagues are quite often near that and at the unsecured border with the Russian Federation. The problem is, until we get there, if we drive from Luhansk or Donetsk, we have to pass through multiple checkpoints. By the time we arrive at these border crossing points, the people there, these armed men, know that we are coming, and if not otherwise, they would tell us quite often, especially in the Luhansk region, to move back some 500, 600 meters. And because they also don't allow us to open permanent presences nearby the border, Novozovsk, Antratsit, for instance. We also have to leave the border areas rather quickly in order to reach the bases further away. That also limits the time we can be there. So yes, we reach the border, but what we see there is highly controlled and cannot be described as independent monitoring, not because we don't want it, but because the sites do not want us to be there. And I've said many times, any restriction that we encounter is a fact in itself, because it is a fact that the sites do not want us to see what's going on in these areas, because they know exactly the next day it will be in our daily report.
Mr. Cook, you say about sites and about that ceasefire can be stopped by for like 1 hour or more, and sites can do this. But I remember this moment when it was Debaltseve in 2015, and you was there also, and it was in Soledar, as I remembered, and it was also two generals, Ukrainian generals and Russian general, and you tried to go to Debaltseve, but it can't be, you can't do this. And we remember that Debaltseve, to the agreements, is Ukrainian side, yes, to this front line from September 2014, as I remember. And the Ukrainian army always say that this is like some of the villages, and also Debaltseve is our part, and it should be with agreements our part. And they try now to to make this front line as it was in 2014. You understand me? What do you think? They like. It's two agreements, they can do this or they couldn't?
First of all, I want to be very clear that all areas, also those that the government has no control at the moment, are Ukraine. There should be no misunderstanding there, up to the unsecure border with the Russian Federation. Now, what is also clear is that a sustainable solution in this conflict, we believe, can only be reached at the table. I understand the military logic that also is prevailing at the contact line, but the Minsk agreements and a sustainable solution requires discussions, requires not unilateral moves, but mutual understanding as to what needs to happen. I'm not suggesting that Ukraine should act unilateral and unilaterally withdraw its weapons and unilaterally cease the fire. That will not work. It will only work if all those who have promised to end the fighting, that is Moscow, Kyiv, certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk, do so in mutual arrangements and agreements.
If we are talking about Debaltseve, for you, it was the most, I don't know, the most, not difficult, but the most, because this is, it was the front line, it was the front line by Minsk agreement, and it was just destroyed. It was the most difficult time, the most difficult period, to know.
It certainly was one that was very challenging. Not least because we were not allowed to enter in that critical phase. Debaltseve, myself and the Ukrainian general at the time, we were ready to undertake that patrol, but the armed formations or the Russian general present there would not issue the necessary assurances that we could do so safely. And that, of course, was difficult to accept. We have seen the aftermath of that event. We had been in Debaltseve. We also have meanwhile opened a presence there to be able to document what has happened and what is continue to happen in this area. The special monitoring mission has, after that incident, documented very clearly where the line has moved and where it hasn't moved, and how positions have changed over time by meticulously documenting the security situation at the contact line as the 57 participating states have mandated the OSCE.
Mr. Cook, you always say that, and missions say that facts are matters, but sometimes, I don't know, it's media or fault, or maybe something was misunderstanding about the last year interview to Foreign Policy. You said that yes, facts are matters, but I think that something was misunderstanding or misinterpreting what it was and what you said about Russian involvement.
Well, as you know, the SMM is mandated to establish facts. Mm-hmm. We are not an intelligence gathering operation. We are not the police. We don't investigate, and we are not the court either. what we do is, and what we have been tasked by 57 participating states, is to provide facts. And these facts are very important, and they speak for themselves. In that interview, I have listed a whole catalogue of facts, of very important observations that we have made. And I can repeat, we have seen in the last 3 months, at least at 9 occasions, convoys entering, exiting Ukraine in an area where there is no border crossing. Military-type vehicles that we have seen leaving and entering Ukraine. We have seen it from the air. These are the facts. We have seen weapons alongside these convoys. All of that has been made public available. Before that, we have seen tracks of vehicles that lead to that unsecure border with the Russian Federation. We have seen electronic warfare systems, Shito, Torn, just to mention 2 of them. We have documented training areas, tank training areas, shooting training areas. We have publicized pictures of large amounts of heavy weapons, tanks, mortar, artillery. We have spoken to people who claimed they were part of a Russian military unit fighting on rotation in Ukraine. These are the facts that we have been presenting and more over these 4.5 years. Now, people might choose to react on these facts and take measures to stop the violations that we have been detecting. People might also choose to ignore these facts, and more often than not that happens. And people may also draw their own conclusions based on these facts. Our task is to present them as objectively and as detailed as possible, and we've done so in the past year. It is very important to note that rather than trying to point the finger across the line, what needs to be done with these facts, we would prefer, is to take measures to remedy the shortcomings, the violations of the agreement that we have seen and documented over the past 4.5 years.
What about Russian soldiers in non-control government area? I mean, because you said that you saw the people who said that they are Russian soldiers, but they were like prisoners of war, something like this, as I understand. But did you saw, I mean, in Debaltseve also, or in Donetsk, in Luhansk, the people who were Russian soldiers?
The 2 persons we have been speaking to, they were prisoners by the Ukrainian authorities. We met them here in Kyiv, and they told us their story and presented us with their claim. When we see people on the ground that wear certain insignia, we report about them as we see it on the ground, but drawing conclusion, once again, from this observation is not for the mission to take. We are not the judge, we are not the police, we don't investigate. We have the task to provide facts, and we have provided many facts. The SMM, through the 4.5 years, has provided a wealth of facts that will stand on black and white and in picture now in the medium term, but also for those who will write the history of what happened to Ukraine. All of those facts speak for themselves. They're very clear, very detailed, and have not been disputed.
You know, maybe very good that both sides said about OSCE monitoring mission that you are blind, that you are often not in that period of time when it's shelling, when it's very not safe situation, very dangerous situation, you are not there, and it always was like they want, I mean, both sides, they want from you something more that you can do. I mean, not only monitoring, but helping. What can you say about this? You was in that areas always, or you can't be in that areas, I mean, dangerous areas, because it's dangerous for you?
First of all, once again, our reports speak a very clear language. Over 400,000 ceasefire violations registered last year, over 200,000 this year. 3,000 weapons seen in violation of agreed withdrawal lines. Every day new minefields that we detect. Every day we report about destroyed property and have the sad task to triangulate victims among the civilian population that either get injured or killed. These facts speak for themselves, and it makes it very clear that the special monitoring mission isn't blind because it reports on a daily basis. If it cannot report, then it's because the sides don't want it to report. The sides do blind the mission. But what I think is even more concerning, and I've said this elsewhere, is that the sides, those who need to make decisions to end the violence, those who have promised to end the violence, they are blind because they're not reading our reports. If they would read our reports and would take action, then the situation would dramatically improve. As soon as the sites would enable us to do our job, we would see more and we would be able to do more. It's their choice, not our choice. We are ready to work day and night out on patrol. We are ready to deploy to the unsecure border with the Russian Federation. We are ready to be closer and longer at the contact line. Our members are ready, but the sites don't enable us to do so. We have a mandate to be out 24/7. The sites do not respect our mandate. If they would, we would do so immediately.
Mr. Hook, this 2 weeks ago, as I remember, it was a situation about these 2 civilians who were killed they were like on the mines near Toretsk. You know this?
It was in Solote, Rodine.
Near Rodina, yes. And they were like live for 5 days or even more on the mines land, and nobody just can took them from this territory. And as I know, you was there, or some people from OSCE mission, and tried to stop the ceasefire and take these people off from the land. This is also your work, or I mean, the bodies of the civilians is not your work, or why it was?
The special monitoring mission learned about an explosion in that area, and subsequently also learned that 2 civilians got injured and died in that area. We have immediately been contacting the sites, and in order to facilitate a local ceasefire, which then should have enabled the sites, again in mutual agreement, to recover the bodies of these 2 civilians. We have been on both sides of the contact line every day for 5 days, during which the sites have not managed to agree on who should be doing that specific job. The SMM is facilitating help at the contact line. We are not doing it ourselves in terms of the recovery operation, but we talk to the sites. We facilitate an indirect dialogue because we have teams on both sides of the contact line, which then enables those who can recover them to do their job under an arrangement facilitated by the SMM. The same thing we do with repair of critical infrastructure. The same we do every day for the Donetsk water filtration station. Since the beginning of June, every day 3-4 patrols are around on both sides the filtration station to enable the operation of this facility so that the civilian workers can go to work within an arranged localized ceasefire and then provide clean water for government and non-government controlled areas. As we speak, we have patrols on both sides of the contact line for the Krasnohorivka gas distribution station. We have been helping for Ukrainian reconstruction efforts to take place in Avdiivka, in Marinka. We have been repairing the South Donbas water pipeline within the framework of our facilitated localized ceasefire. Just to mention a few examples, there is indeed a lot of effort done by the monitors. While they're monitoring the situation, they facilitate an indirect dialogue between the sites that enables then these humanitarian repair works, delivery, or even the recovery of the fallen to take part. It's very important at the same time to understand that this is symptom treatment, because very often when we have facilitated a repair, the evening after the repair has successfully completed, the shelling starts again, and then the damage reoccurs because the root causes, the military technical root causes, remain unaddressed. The positions are far too close, heavy weapons are not being withdrawn. So that needs to change, but the mission can't withdraw the weapons, only the sites can do that.
But you always say about that in the evening it starts shelling, the sites start shelling. It's because the monitoring mission is not there anymore, I mean in the evening and in the night. But when it's day, like sites afraid to shell because they're afraid to, I don't know, kill someone from monitoring mission or what?
No, because they decide to continue fighting. It's as simple as that. It's their decision, not our decision, to continue fighting. It's their orders that have been issued. And as you know, publicly, the sites say that they are retaining their right to return fire. I understand that from a military perspective. But they made it public that they are not ceasing fire entirely, that they are returning fire. It is their decision and it cannot be attributed to the mission. Yes, we may have a deterrence effect on the sites with our presence, but that has limits. Every day our monitors are very close by the exchange of fire, or actually are trapped in crossfire. Our reports are very clear on this as well. So it is not true that when the monitors are present that there is silence. There is a clear deterrence moment, but it has limits as to how far this can go, and it's entirely 100% the decision of the sites whether or not they cease fire or not. If the sites would do what they have promised to do, these two major risks would be immediately reduced, and the mission would be able to conduct more work and would be able to document further. Once again, it is the decision of the sites that is making the difference here between more freedom of movement and less freedom of movement. And what needs to be done is very clear and had been agreed before. No new agreement is needed, and we have been documenting, which is equally important, that the sites have it in their hands to withdraw weapons, to disengage, to demine if they want to. Political decisions are required for this, and it has to happen mirror-like on both sides of the contact line. We will be continuing to documenting where that is necessary, but it's the sites that are best placed to undertake measures that protect our staff on the ground.
My last two questions, one about what can't you understand till now about this conflict in Donbas, I mean, and last question about what is your next mission, Mr. Hook?
Well, I have very great difficulties in both accepting and to some degree understanding why the decision makers that have it in their hands to end this madness are not listening to the people on the ground. They speak a very clear language. They don't want this conflict. They claim it's not their conflict, and all they want is to end. That is what I have great difficulties. The underlying group dynamic, as I have witnessed in other conflicts, doesn't exist here. The people don't believe in this contact line. It's a harsh reality for them every day if they have to cross it, but they don't accept it. And I do feel that decision makers need to start listening to these people, because they know exactly what they want and what they want for their own future. What concerns my own future, I haven't made yet a decision what comes next. I'm looking forward to some break, which I hadn't had for 4.5 years. I hope to see some of the nice parts of Ukraine. And certainly I will, regardless what I will do next, not forget Ukraine and Ukrainians. And I'm sure that the mission that will remain here, of course, will continue to work for the same, for Ukrainians and for Ukrainians.
Thank you so much, and for your vocals.
Thank you.